Right. We have a packed agenda today. We'll be covering some of the basics around AI, large language models, and we'll go into actual finance and accounting use cases for AI so you can see how some companies are using it today. A little bit about Routable for those of you who don't know us. Routable is an accounts payable automation solution helping companies reduce manual tasks by 80%, send faster payments for less, and eliminate compliance headaches. Routable's deep integrations and configurable workflows support complex business requirements with ease. And I am thrilled to be joined by Omri and Nicolas Boucher for this webinar. Uh, Nicolas is a thought leader in AI for finance, FP&A, and controlling, sharing insights with over 1 million followers. As the founder of the AI Finance Club, he has trained more than 5,000 people in ChatGPT for finance. That's pretty massive. Nicola works with global companies like Mercedes-Benz, Chanel, and KPMG to deliver AI and finance training, and he now focuses on helping finance teams adopt AI and automation to drive efficiency. Welcome, Nicolas. Omri Moore is our co-founder and CEO of Routable, where he's responsible for the company's vision and business strategy. He's hyper-focused on providing tangible value for Routable's customers and approaches every business decision with a customer-first mindset. Omri is a serial entrepreneur with a track record of successful exits, including experience building fintech infrastructure for marketplaces, optimizing e-commerce shopping carts, and designing inventory management systems. Welcome, Omri and Nicolas.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right. We're going to kick things off with a quick poll question. I'm curious if anyone has plans to implement AI within your finance org in 2025. Maddie, go ahead and share this. Thank you. This I'm really interested in, just given I know AI is on every business's agenda for the coming year, but I'm not sure that it's throughout all of the departments. So really curious to see what we get back from this. Maddie, do you want to go ahead and share the results? Ooh, pretty even mix here between yes and maybe. Just a couple people chiming in with no. Nicola, Omri, curious to know if you have any thoughts. Nicola, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so what is interesting is when we were doing this kind of questions like 2 years ago, it was like almost nobody touched AI, almost nobody even like thought about implementing AI. And every 6 months, you see like the plan of using AI is increasing and increasing. And what seemed in the past to be something really futuristic, now it's a real topic. I see a lot of companies, they give, for example, access to Copilot because it's the easiest tool if you have already Microsoft license. I think more and more users also understand that AI is coming to their existing tool because it's not only like going to new tools, is AI is going to a lot of incumbent tools. And I think everybody on their phone have now like a AI app. So even personally, a lot of people have adopted it, which we see in those polls changing. And I'm sure if we do a poll in 6 months, we'll see now like yes at 60, 70%.
I concur with that, Nicholas. I think at a high level, Nicola, the fact that we all have Gmail or Outlook means we're probably using it right now, right? So it doesn't feel like we're using it for work, but it's being added to our workplace as we speak. And you're right. Every company right now in the world is trying to figure out how to inject more benefits to the workplace with some sort of AI. I think we're kind of in this growth stage where companies are trying to figure out if they can actually give you a good solution, not just talk about it, right? So it's in this weird place where, yes, it can summarize my email, but it can't tell people that I'm, busy and can't talk right now yet, right? So we have a long way to go, but it's a really interesting time.
Great. All right. Well, What do we really mean by AI? AI is a lot of different things. Nicholas, I'm wondering if you could break down some of the most commonly used forms of AI and what are some real world examples that people might have seen?
One thing I want to start with is a concept that we have been using since years, even before ChatGPT was the tool that everybody is using. And it's something called OCR. So I don't know, and people can tell us in the chat if people know what is OCR. But let me give you an example that you might experience if you drive too fast and you get captured by the police or the city and you are doing something wrong. Well, actually, the technology is taking a picture of your license plate. And first, it's a picture. So the computer doesn't know its words on it. But then there is a program that has been trained to recognize those characters and recognizing here that is ABC 5678. And now it doesn't become anymore just an image, but it becomes text characters that you can use somewhere else. And for example, here you can map that to the database to find out who is the owner of this car. And so that's what is existing already since years. Actually, like while preparing for this webinar, I discovered that this technology was already in place in 1950. Like there was a bank that started using this in 1950, and now like it's evolving with LLMs. But this is really something that is not new, and that's already AI because it's basically a computer is learning the meaning of these images to make it text. And for finance, what does it mean? So I think a lot of people notice that it's OCR is optical character recognition. And the way we have been using it before is to scan documents to get an image from that. And from this image, we apply the OCR program to get a text document. And this text document will be then mapped into our systems in our ERP, most often, to start to book invoices. So that's how we have been using already AI before ChatGPT was there. So that's one point where we can all use it. I'm just checking the stop sharing. Yep. So OCR is not new, but what is new actually is that now OCR are mapped with something new, which is like all of these LLMs or NLP, so understanding of these words. And before in a lot of companies, and that was the case in the company as I worked with, you had always a human that was there once the picture was scanned and recognized, which was this human who was mapping all of the key items on an invoice to the ERP. And each time you have a new invoice, you always need a human to say, oh yeah, if it's written invoice number, then map it with the ERP in the field invoice number. But now what is good is we have LLMs and NLP that understand the meaning of invoice number and will map it with the field invoice number in the ERP. And just quickly to show what is a LLM, because I found a really cool images to illustrate what is LLMs and NLP. So how LLM works, because it's always a bit obscure for people. So there is like a really cool YouTube website called 3 Blue 1 Brown. So or AI Simple. Like you just look to AI Simple, and basically here is an example of how it works. So imagine you have a text that is just Paris is a city in, and basically the way it will work, it will look at all of the probability. What is the best word after these 4 words or 5 words? So friends is the highest priority. So it will start writing the sentence based on this. So here, if we have the case where we have the user that says, give me some ideas for what to do when visiting Santiago, then the AI assistant will start with some probability to generate the words that will come based on the input. And so one by one, those words will come and will populate the sentence. And you can see it's just probability. And this probability were configured based on a big database of texts and internet and books and articles that was fed to this big database. And now with this is basically what we are all using when we use ChatGPT. And so if you present to this tool an invoice, then it can make sense of the fields on this invoice. So I will stop here for a second, and because I know that Omri has also a lot to say on that.
Just a little.
All right, Omri, do you want to take us through maybe machine learning and Gen AI and talk a little bit about those now?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, with machine learning, we all have been using it for a long time. Um, it's one of those things when you're shopping on Amazon, maybe you're shopping for a new tarp for your house or cleaning products, and you accidentally get suggested diapers. Machine learning at a very base level, a good example of this are recommendation engines, right? Nicole, if you flip on to the next example here, I think we have a highlight of what we're supposed to show, right? So this is actually my shopping, Amazon business shopping recommendations, which I thought was pretty interesting. Um, it showed me books that I could read. It showed me a pillow, which is hilarious for office and furniture because I use a standing desk and I don't actually sit down. But I really liked to understand that they think that I could, use more cushion for my lower back and posture. And it showed me some other information that wasn't as relevant. We actually get a lot more value, I think, in Netflix. If you think about it, every single one of our Netflix is personalized, and personalization comes from machine learning. It comes from understanding the patterns of our behaviors and understanding patterns of our data. So at a high level, we do use machine learning every day. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about a deeper dive of machine learning and then taking a step forward also on how it's applied to give you information in real time during the OCR process, PO matching processes, and any other processes in finance. And then on the generative AI side, I think that right now the best example, as Nicolas was saying, is ChatGPT or any form of new, what I would call web online agents that can give you very quick responses, right? If you wanted to learn how to make a grilled cheese or a pesto, ChatGPT is a great um, AI tool to understand your text and follow up. If you guys saw recently, you can now pay about $200 a month for OpenAI Pro, and it can even write a research paper for you. So one of the really cool things about generative AI is it's taking all of these pieces to the left and compounding them and slowly but surely getting smarter. And we'll be talking later about how much data is being fed to it and moreover, um, how it's able to process all this information and give you a real-time response, as Nicolas was just showing, which is actually the most critical part, is to get you that answer correct, because we've all used Siri or, the Google Assistant a few times, and we've asked it to record, a reminder for tomorrow at 3 p.m., and it says back, all right, 3 p.m. the band is playing, right? Which is not the things that we want to do. So generative AI is taking that next step and that next example in the right way.
Awesome. All right. Well, we already got a little bit of information on LLMs, large language models. Omri, I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper to help the attendees understand what is a large language model and how does it work. I think this is really foundational knowledge for understanding AI.
And Nicolas, feel free to join me in any part of this conversation because this is a fun one. So I think that taking a step back, I wanted to show machine learning before we even stepped into LLMs, right? So the goal of machine learning is to discover patterns in data, and not just patterns, but relationship between input and outcome. So we can make a new prediction, right? So I'll give you, before I give you the next example here and visually, let's say I watch an action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It could, and then I watch maybe a romantic comedy with Adam Sandler. It could suggest a action movie, romantic comedy with The Rock on Netflix, right? I'm not saying that these are my personal preferences for watching movies, but I am talking about how there is relational information that can create patterns. This next example is really cool. So if you look here, this shows in orange the rhythm and tempo. So the energy and tempo of reggaeton songs, right, in orange, and R&B songs in blue. And when introducing a new observation, so if you can see, it's the pink observation, right? It's understanding that the tempo is 30 and the energy is 20. And using machine learning, it's giving a probability that it is 92% likely to be R&B. So at a very simple level, when people talk to you about machine learning, we're saying, okay, what is the likelihood and what is the intended pattern? Now, that straight line that you see there isn't actually machine learning. Machine learning is curved, and it's really weird, right? The more data you input, the more nodes that you add in there, the harder it is to draw that line, and the more the line dances and tries to predict the information. And at a high level, this is a fun way to think about it because just like the Netflix example, this is more of if you ask Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use to give you a next song recommendation, it's going to try to infer what is that model and what is that line to get a good understanding of what have we been listening to and what could we listen to and how do I categorize what I'm actually listening to now. So the fun part about LLMs is I'm going to tell you that the next like 5 or 10 slides, I actually talked to ChatGPT and I said, hi, I'm doing a presentation for finance people who are likely not technical, and we need to come up with a presentation for explaining what LLMs are. So think about that. Um, the fact that here, Nicolas and I are coming in as experts, but we are using this tool to make our lives easier to present it back to you. So at a very base level, you know how your phone suggests words while you're texting. Think of LLMs as that, right? As Nicholas showed earlier in that awesome video, it's getting that predictive next word, but on a much larger and more advanced scale. And I'm actually going to dig into much larger and more advanced scale so it can have the context of what you've already written. If you think about an LLM, it's that super autocomplete in an agent, but it's also a giant library, like truly a giant library. And instead of understanding what we think about, if I think about my brain, I think about the books that I learned, the lessons that I've had, the articles that I've read, the conversations, and so forth. For us as humans, we're thinking about it as mediums that have an end to end, right? So, for example, this webinar is a medium. It has a beginning, it has an end, it has a structure. You learn as a human through a very structured beginning, middle, and end format. LLMs don't do that. They understand word patterns and they're fed billions of points of information at a high level. So, this is actually a really, really fun way to look at it. Um, they don't only predict the next word, but while they're predicting the next word, they're also trying to understand based on math, and I'll show this in a moment, the relationship between words, right? So if we look at the sentence, the alien landed on Earth because it needed to hide on a planet, we understand from learning language very young in school that alien is the individual who landed, Earth is a planet and Earth is where they landed. It likely only applies for an alien. This is nothing new. This feels like, we're doing elementary school education. However, this is also how we are feeding information and how the LLM is trying to understand the relationship between words. Because I'll show this in a moment, these words to the LLM aren't words, they're numbers. So it's not reading, it's predicting. So I think the introduction of ChatGPT, and this is the the T, the transformer, generative transformer, is the architecture. The transformer is the architecture that allows us to put kind of framing around the conversation, right? So in this next image, what I think is really cool is that if you can see here, these transformers represent word spaces and confined, what I would say, relational um, patterns. Uh, the words are placed close together, and if you can see, walk and walking are a good example uh, of a pattern, for example. And cat and dog, which isn't on this example, can be on a similar node in a small word cloud, right? Cat, dog, maybe kitten, but car, C-A-R, would be far, far, far away from it, letting it understand that it doesn't have the right relation for the given context and helping it understand that there's just a different pattern in the word space and the information and the relationship between words and concepts, which I think is really, really important. And here's the fun thing. So they're responding and they're not thinking yet. If we break this down, as I mentioned, they recognize words as text. So before I go on the example on the right, if you think about it, an LLM will take text as we know it and convert them into tokens, and it will assign it a number. So hello will just be to an LLM 12345, and world will be 37890, right? And what it's doing right now, yeah, Sebastian, thank you. Excellent comment. Um, and what it's doing right now is trying to, first of all, understand the tokens or the information that you see here, and then using math, predicting statistically the likeliest answer. And I wanted to show you a few examples, right? Because the sky is blue and gray actually makes sense based on the context of the future conversation. And falling could make sense, but maybe that's part of a song, right? So you want to give it more context, and so forth. And then I think one of the big things that's really, really, really critical here is that scale is what's really important here, right? So one of the, if you think about it, with transformers, we want to provide guidance and architecture. At the same time, we also want to provide enough data. So one of the most interesting data points is that our brain has about, 100 billion neurons, and ChatGPT 3, not 4 or not 4.5, I think has 175 billion. A big part of why LLMs are expensive, and we're having this conversation about what it is cost to create one and train one, and OpenAI versus DeepSeek and all of these conversations online, is because the amount of information that needs to go in is really critical. And if you think about it, they're just reading a huge, huge, huge amount of text, and they still actually fail to understand the world. They're just in this highly, highly probabilistic environment where they can give you the correct understanding. But again, they're not always right. And then a last little tidbit here. I think this was a fun overview of showing the relationship between LLMs and deep learning, which is learning from images and unstructured data, machine learning, which is pattern recognition, and then artificial intelligence right now is we're broadly defined all of these patterns combined and being used at the very same time, and introducing to you as AI. And I think that's why it's somewhat intimidating, is because Nicolas says, there's so much happening in the background in real time. And then we just see an ad saying AI is here. And then we're told to trust it and try it.
Well, the trusting and trying leads us right into our next topic. Thank you, Omri, for that. A lot of teams, including my own here at Routable, are really concerned with data security when it comes to AI. And I think that's especially critical when you're managing financial data. So, Nicholas, how can finance and accounting teams leverage AI while ensuring data security?
Yeah, thank you for asking that because that's really the number one question we always get. I have to say, over the last months, we get more mature on that. We need to take this, I'll say, this fear, which is legit, but we need to transform it in action. And a lot of people right now, they are afraid the same way that they were afraid 15 years ago. Remember when cloud arrived and nobody thought, oh God, I will never like leave the financial data out of my server or out of my laptop. And now everybody is, like on a Wi-Fi, like connecting to your cloud. Your emails are somewhere in the US in a server, or maybe in Europe, or somewhere that nobody knows where it's located, but we trust it because it take times. We trust now that our informations are in the cloud. We trust players like Google or Microsoft or Amazon. And if you look now, AI had a lot of bad publicity at the beginning because we heard about data leaks, we heard about people just believing too much that AI could do everything and just putting all of the company data inside without that companies could tell people, wait, like we don't know yet what they do with our data. And so this fear is good to transform into knowledge and then to transform into action. And so let's use this fear to get knowledgeable, all of us ourselves. So I've prepared something really small, but on data security, like I say, it's not a new topic. All of these providers here, now they are recognized and used by all of the biggest companies in the world and also smaller companies and also individuals. They are also at the scrutiny of all of the governments. There is a lot of people that also try to hack them. So they have really the highest security standards. And what is also behind those tools, you have actually AWS is behind Claude, Anthropic. Like Amazon is backing Anthropic and giving a lot of systems to Anthropic. Azure and Microsoft, they are behind OpenAI as well. They are working together, and of course, Copilot. Google is behind Gemini. So now that we know, okay, like it's not something new. Actually, we know the story. Now let's read what are these providers like OpenAI or Microsoft. What are they saying on their website? What are they saying when you sign a contract? And that's where you can actually read that their standard of security, like for example, using SOC 2 when you sign a contract with ChatGPT Enterprise. If you look at a lot of SaaS company right now, not a lot of them have SOC 2 level. It's quite high standard. And if your company is already on Microsoft, if you read the text here, Copilot says that it's following one-to-one the same security commitment than all of the other Microsoft products. And that's actually what my clients right now are doing. Most of them either moving with ChatGPT if they are not really too intricate with one Microsoft or Google, they will go with ChatGPT. But if they are already like they are using Gmail, Google Sheet, they have Google Cloud, then they will just add another license that says, okay, now I will on top use Gemini, but I don't need to have a new vendor. I don't need to look through all of the security issues because Google is telling me those are the same standards. And like you have already all of your users inside your Google admin panel. So it's the same for the IT. They don't need to do extra work. Same if your company is with Microsoft. I see a lot of clients going into Copilot because it's easy. They can control what is happening. And now also what I believe is that the benefit of AI is not only using a chatbot, but is also being integrated everywhere. And there is something really interesting for those who already have Copilot business. With Copilot business, when you chat, I had 1 week ago a training with a European retailer, CNA. I don't know if people in Europe know them. And we were doing an exercise, and somebody tells me, "Wow, it's crazy! Like I ask about the number of stores we will have next year, just because they were doing an exercise." And Copilot responded using an email that was in the person's mailbox. And the person never asked, like, yeah, like go in my email and check for this document. But Copilot found out by itself because it was linked also with Outlook. And that's where you can see like a lot of value by having an AI tool integrated also across all of the tools you are already using.
Great. We do need to move on in a second, but Omri, was there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so I love this example because I think it is example of trusting large companies, but at the same time, in that specific example, what if you have really sensitive documents in your email, right? One of the things that we don't have yet is SOC 2, but for AI. And I think that one of the biggest next steps in this is because every company is going to try to be able to roll out an AI model essentially, but not all companies have this resources and standards of security. So we'll need some sort of a pattern because you might want to tell it, Nicolas, do not have access to my email, right? And I think that's the interesting part. It's about permissions control, it's about data security, and so forth. And the more we create a new standard for you to communicate to a company what it can read, learn from, and also as an IT director, what can an employee upload? Can they just ask questions? Can they upload PDFs? Can they upload CSVs? That's going to be the really fun questions of how we create internal company governance versus trusting big companies with lots of resources to little companies that are far, far away from the resources and security protocols that the big four have.
Great. So I think that gives us a really good foundation on LLMs and data security to go into a little more detail. Um, there was a lot of groaning in the chat when we were talking about OCR previously. And, as we discussed, it's been around a really long time. Omri, I'm curious how you're seeing corporate finance teams use OCR today. And I do know a lot of people have been burned in the past. So can you talk about how it's improving over time and how they should think about it now?
Yeah, so I'll talk about AI powered OCR, but I first want to talk about the fact that most of our experience with OCR, even today, even like literally maybe 30 minutes after this phone call, it feels like you're using a copy machine. It feels like you're going to like, because what it's doing, it's maybe reading 2 pieces of information out of 300 pieces of information. And it's just showing you the PDF that you showed it, right? Everybody back in the day has had frustrations with an old copy machine. It feels like OCR is the new copy machine. A better example of this, of old OCR, is actually check scanning, right? I feel like right now, if you guys are familiar with check scanners, you can upload a batch of checks, physical checks, scan them in, and this is the information that banks use to retrieve data. The really interesting thing about check scanning, and also what Nicolas showed earlier with the license plate, is that is structured data, meaning that it's going to have a higher probability because every single time you give it information, it's expecting the information to look the same in the same location. And that's the problem with today's OCR. It is one, very highly structured, and two, assumes that the next piece of information will be structured exactly the same. However, you know your vendors, you know your documents, your contracts. Every person you work with does something differently if only there was a structure, but that will never happen. So with AI powered OCR, I use this image on the left here of Sunny. I don't know if any of you have seen the show Sunny on Apple TV. I highly recommend it. I think they do an amazing job of showing what intelligence could look like in the next 5, 10, 20 years, where you can actually interface with a computer and have a full conversation. The difference here, if you can see on the right-hand side, is this is just not OCR. If you can see, OCR is showing up one time here in extract the file contents in OCR, which Nicolas showed earlier, right? We're giving it a document, it reads it, and then it gives us the information. Taking it the step further, you have to introduce training. So that means that if I got the document information wrong, new OCR needs to give you the ability to train it and say, no, I want to capture the information here and put it on this field. It also needs to understand previous iterations of similar invoices for similar vendors, for example, if we're just talking about invoices. And then it needs to also layer predictive analysis, being able to understand future coding, right? So if you think about it, what you should really, really try to get from OCR this day is OCR plus machine learning plus generative AI and the ability to retrain it. And I think retraining is really, really critical here because that's what allows you as a human to say, I'm not just going to correct myself, I'm also going to correct the model. And ideally, the next time this comes back, it's correct. So, what I'm really excited about is that old OCR should be the thing of the past, and new OCR is right here because it could go from a 50% failure rate to a 100% success rate very quickly based on interactions with you on very few patterns. And here, like OCR experience, I think all I wanted to show here is that just how much data can be in there. You know, we received at our company a request for OCRing a invoice with 1,000 line items, which is more than one page in Chinese, right? In Mandarin, which I think is fantastic, right? You're going to ask yourself, can my OCR handle multiple languages? What fields of data is it capturing? You're going to want to ask your provider, can I train my OCR if it fails? Right? These are questions. What happens if it fails? These are like new questions in vocabulary that we should be asking. We can say, does it have any predictive capabilities? Right? Will it generate new responses based on my input? And then Cole, if you take it a step further, also most OCR that we use today only does extraction at the bill header level, meaning just the invoice date, the due date, the invoice number, maybe the vendor name. Also, you're going to want to say, hey, does this OCR have line item level data? Wow, that was a lot for me to say. But you're going to want to find details because you know this as people in finance, the bill header data is very static. The line items is what can change. So an invoice or a purchase order or a receipt can vary drastically from one invoice to another, even if it's from the same vendor. So using OCR that is predictive and that is trainable is really the new experience that is needed to be demanded by from finance professionals so that they can stop feeling so betrayed by the OCR side of today.
Amazing. Thank you. So moving on to machine learning and its applications, this was another thing we spoke about before. Uh, Nicholas, what are some of the ways you have seen this used in finance? I'm curious also where you think teams can start, as well as anything really innovative that we might not have seen before.
So first, I think people need to stop being afraid of machine learning and thinking, well, that's for data scientists, that's for IT, that's not for me. When we forecast in finance, what we actually do is looking at the past to identify some trends. If, for example, your business has a lot of sales in March, but low sales in August, often what you will do is for the forecast of next year, you will show this seasonality in your figures. And you do it because you learn it from the past. When we say machine learning is instead of the machine just being, I will say like rule-based and just having a formula, it's actually just looking at the past and trying by itself to identify those seasonality, for example. Or like Omri showed, if you see in songs some trends, some patterns, to see for the new songs if they follow the same patterns. So for finance, what does it mean? Actually, now that you don't need to code anymore because you have the generative AI that can code for you can already build yourself a mini machine algorithm that forecasts your revenue next year using seasonality. And it is really simple. Let me show you an example. So imagine that you want to forecast next year your revenue, and you want to also impact your seasonality. What you need is two things. First, you need data with only two columns. One column with your dates. So imagine your daily sales. And another column with your volume. Could be quantity, could be revenue in dollar or in euro. And then you need the code to read this data and understand the seasonality from this. But you don't need to code it because you ask ChatGPT to code it for you. And then once you use these two, and it's available for everybody, like all of us, we can do that today, you get this graph. And this graph can be behind a table, but you get this graph where you have here in black, all of these dots are the actuals. And we can all see with our eyes, because we can also learn, not only the machine can learn, we can learn the seasonality here. And then we see here the forecast. And so here the forecast has been computed by the machine. And this is only with a really small code here. Like everything that is in green is not really a code, it's just a command. So you have only like 4 lines that is doing this algorithm. So if you want to try, you can already try that today. It's called Prophet, it's done by Meta, and it shows the seasonality. So that's what I would recommend for everybody to start with, to take away a bit this fear of machine learning.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. All right. So moving on to diving a little deeper into generative AI, not just for creating recipes. Uh, Omri, how can finance teams bring Gen AI into their workflows to gain efficiencies?
I think you just need to break down your workflows. And our first example of this is going back to the invoice OCR process, but before even the OCR side is actually catching if the invoice is fraudulent. You know, one of the most interesting things is that the average loss for a company is $1 million across all companies in the United States on invoice fraud. And more than 65% of finance professionals experience invoice fraud relatively often. So this is what we wanted to kind of look into. When you break down the supply chain of reading an invoice, coding it, and so forth, we wanted to say, hi, can we use generative AI to capture invoice fraud? Nicole, if we go into the next slide, what we wanted to do is not only just detect fraud, but we also wanted to create a way to find human error. So if somebody miscalculated tax or a discount, and also like create a compliance layer of protection where we are truly trying to understand, is even the sender of this invoice correct? Or did the IP address or did the email structure change from the previous and the current? So in this next quick video, we'll be showing you of what we've been building at Routable to actually inject generative AI to capture invoice fraud in your day-to-day finance process. Hi, everyone. We wanted to share a quick demo of a new project that we've been working on, which is how to capture invoice fraud at a high level before a bill is coded. So what we're introducing now is giving you a new way to, at the inbox level, when you receive a PDF, look at a document and see if it is high risk. And stepping into it, if you click on View Invoice, we're going to give you a little indicator that we found high severity indication. As you scroll through the bill form, more indicators, for example, like duplicated invoice number, address changed, and so forth, new bank account detected. And if you click on the view instance, we're going to give you a trust score for each document, where you can move the invoice to a review status and take additional actions to decide with your team. Now, the great part about this too is that we're going to be talking back about this information. For example, we know that this invoice has been edited, meaning that someone took over the document, right? So that means that they took over the document, they, like using a whiteout, edited the contents, and we have highlighted the invoice date, the address, the total amount. Those things have been changed. If you click on invoice has been edited, we're going to talk to you about specifically what's going on here. As well, we're going to recognize, for example, that the bank account has changed. And we're going to get smarter than that, right? Right now, it's saying that it's a Wells Fargo bank account, and it's a new bank account, right? But we're also going to read the document and understand that the routing number is not associated to Wells Fargo, but it's actually associated to a Bank of America bank account. Doing all these tiny steps along the way to help indicate if we have concerns about the data that is coming through. This is just a highlight. Happy to do a more in-depth demo if you're interested. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole. And yeah, this is just a small example of us actually using generative AI to try to find the smallest mistakes, whether they're truly mistakes or they're malicious activities by fraudsters, and to give you context in real time on what's happening.
Awesome. Very cool to see. Nicolas, anything you'd want to add on the topic of Gen AI?
Depends how much time we still have if we want to cover questions.
I guess we should probably move on to questions. Just a reminder, if you stay for the next 11 minutes or so, you'll be entered to win a pair of Ray-Ban Meta glasses. Very excited about that. Yeah, so just in conclusion, feel free to start entering your questions into the chat at the moment, and we'll field those. But Omri, anything you want to wrap up on what AI can help you achieve?
I think that more the question is what problems you have at work and what problems take the most time, and invite what I would call a balance between process automation and deep discovery, because that's what generative AI can do. As Nicolas showed, you can do forecasting. As I showed, you can catch invoice fraud. As we also talked about, we can predict invoice coding. We can take it a step further and suggest who should be approving an invoice and so forth. There's a lot of things we could be using it in reconciliation. But as finance professionals, or dunning for accounts receivable, as finance professionals, we just do a lot. And I think that it would be really wise for you to talk about what are the top 5 to 10 things that you do each day, and then highlight the ones that take the most time because they require the most data. As we talked about, these GPTs take in billions of data points. And if your company can use an AI tool that has the right security parameters, it is the right next conversation to have, say, these 2 things block me from doing my job. They take up too much time. How do I have a conversation about increasing my efficiency while maintaining my work quality at an extremely high level?
Great. Nicolas, anything to add there? And then we'll jump into the Q&A.
Yeah, well, what I can do is I can show you something, because some people are asking about financial analysis and how to, like, a good use case of GenAI. Think about, let me show you one graph. Especially if you are working in SaaS, you have to do this graph for all of your business. Tell me in the chat if you recognize this graph, or if you don't as well. But this graph is a cohort analysis. And basically what it shows is based on when our client entered in our business, how long they stayed. So for example, here we can see that after 23 months, only 42% of the client stayed with us, for the one that started in January. The thing is, if you want to do that in Excel, it will take you a full afternoon if you are really good with Excel, and it involves formulas, it involves a lot of steps, it involves also conditional formatting. So then we can try to do this with actually generative AI, and the data is really simple to use. It's just a list of transaction per month per client. So if I have this file with just the date, the customer ID, which type of product they buy, and the invoice amount, I can go into ChatGPT and upload this file if I have a contract with ChatGPT. And then you can ask ChatGPT to do the cohort analysis for you. What is really important here, you can see that I add 1 or 2 keywords that will help to make sure the output is good. Like visually is super important here in this prompt. And what is happening is ChatGPT is asking Python to read the file, and then Python reply back to say what type of file it is, and will actually do the same graph, but now you have it in a few seconds instead of having to build that inside your Excel file in just like in your Excel file in one afternoon. So I can read like some people say, yeah, I cannot upload my data in my business and all of this. Okay, then let me show you a trick. If you cannot upload your data in your business, so because what I'm doing has actually a lot of problems. Maybe you cannot upload your data in the business. Maybe also you think about auditability and having the work in a chatbot is not maybe that good. Or you want to use large data or to scale, and having that in ChatGPT is not enough because ChatGPT doesn't read big data. So here, the solution is actually to ask for the code for it to be able to do this in my own environment. Like this, I can replicate exactly the same work. And imagine for the first time, either you give fake data or you just give your headers, but you ask the code on how to do this cohort analysis in a heat map. Because Excel doesn't have yet that unless you use Python in Excel. So you copy and you just paste this code in Google Colab, which is a tool that can read the code and execute the code. Here, I am in my own Google environment. So if I am using Google for work, Gmail, Google Sheet, I can use this here because I'm just uploading my file in my Google Drive. And then I will just play. And you can see that after a few seconds, I will have exactly the same type of graph, but now in my own environment. And this solves everything. It solves the problem of confidentiality of data because I am in my environment. It solves the problem of auditability because here I can keep track of what is happening. I can see the input, the formula, and the output. And I can also scale that. I can apply that on large data because Python code is amazing on large data. And if you don't use Google, your company is not using the Google Suite, it's okay. You can do the same thing in Visual Studio in Microsoft. So really, I recommend to everybody, don't be blocked. This was an example with Python, but I could also have asked for simple graph. I just give my header and say, give me the formula, give me the protocol to do it in my Excel file. And you don't need to give your data to make AI work with you to have financial analysis.
That was really cool. Nicolas.
Yeah, that was awesome. Very insightful. Thank you. Omri, I'm going to hand you this question that came in through the chat. How far away are we from not having any human involved in our AP processes, obviously, except for fraud? Say AI recognizes someone has an invoice in their inbox, takes it, processes it, updates financial forecasts, etc. Yeah, I'll give that to you, Omri.
So, Adrian, thank you for submitting that question. I think it's a lovely question. I don't think that we're there yet simply because humans are scared. But from a functionality perspective, we're very close. I'll give you a good example. Even though tomorrow we can all buy cars that have self-driving, we're not doing it yet, right? I think that we don't yet trust and we don't have a history of confidence in doing it. When it comes to AP, actually fraud can be caught with a human, and that's what's cool now, that you don't have to pay a forensic accountant hundreds of thousands of dollars after the fact, which we just introduced. But going back to your question, I think what's really interesting is that we're getting pretty close to you don't have to code the bill. You don't have to question if this bill is fake or fraudulent, but you will likely still want to approve manually, even though using machine learning, we can predict if this bill should be approved, right? And we can predict when we should pay it, but likely a human will still be in the loop to post the bill to the ERP. They'll be in the loop to release the funds, right? To say, yes, I want to release the funds until we get comfortable with that automation happening. I think in the future, you can just get a report. Hi, Adrian. Tomorrow, we're releasing these 7 payments based on our inference of your historical data in your vendor terms. And we'll probably still want people in the loop for reconciliation, even though reconciliation could do a lot of the work. Now, what you asked about is update financial forecasts. That's where it gets really interesting. So if you think about it, we're talking about removing hours of work. And in theory, the second the bill is posted into your ERP, once you approve it, then that's the ERP's kind of endpoint and kind of starting guideline to go update the the models. Now, you could also say, I don't want to post it in the ERP yet, and given this new invoice, I want to see the potential impact on my financial model. Those are the fun things. I think, Adrian, the number one thing you need to do is to work with a company that wants to listen to you, because this is a fantastic question. And I think it's 50% of it is, are we comfortable? And the other 50% of it is, can we do it? And the fun thing is that a lot of this we can do right now. So it's really about comfort, security, and data governance coming together while also having compliance, because as finance professionals, we just work for an audit, right? Every year, we're working backwards for an audit. So we need to make sure that we're taking the actions that have the paper trails to show an auditors all the steps that we did, and that we have the controls to do so.
Great. I know we're up on time, but Nicolas and Omri, are you comfortable staying a few more minutes to answer a couple more questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, we have a lot of great questions, and
Yeah.
a lot of people are still active. So let's
Yes,
let's do that.
great.
I love it.
So
This is my nerd spot, so this is fantastic.
awesome. All right. So Sunny typed in the Q&A, which process areas do you see companies focusing on from an AI investment perspective? Procure to pay, FP&A, quote to cash? Does it vary by company? Nicolas, I'll hand this question to you to start.
So I think we discussed a lot today about really the P2P process. It's where we have a lot of volume, where we still have a lot of people working on this. And also we have to admit that all of the new people coming into the finance world, they don't really want to work on this task. They want like the sexy stuff like FP&A. They want to be close to management. And so we have to adapt, because a lot of people are saying that jobs will disappear in finance. Actually, if you talk to CFOs, they have problems finding people. So because we have problem finding people, we need first to focus on filling up the task with the technology. And I think P2P is really the first process. Then I think R2R as well, so reporting, so record to report, because right now it's so manual, and you could already do so much before AI, but AI can help you record more. Like think about this sales contract that all companies have that are in the paper at the secretary, and then sometimes finance will scan something and then do a list just on the finance terms. Then the project management team will do again a scan and will do another list with milestones. And all of the companies will do their own ledger, but there will not be one ledger that just records all of the sales transactions and sales contracts. So AI can help you do that. And then after you can move on and record much more information that will help you report, and not only report the actuals, but also forecast. Because if there is in your sales, so customer relationship management tool, so for example, Salesforce, if you have all of the discussions with your client and you don't use it to forecast your sales, then you are missing a lot of opportunities to have an accurate forecast. And this is where it's going to help a lot of companies that are going to use unstructured data to forecast. I talked a few weeks ago with people from Coca-Cola, They have already been doing it since 2-3 years. And now a lot of companies are doing their own model because they see the opportunity of using your own forecasting model.
Great, thank you. All right, one more question for Omri. How can nonprofits with limited budgets adopt AI tools without overextending resources? And what specific aspects of financial operations can they leverage use of AI? And I think this question came in specific to nonprofits, but I think a lot of people are on limited budgets, so we
Great.
can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, one of the really true things is that, we moved from a high, like a beautiful zero interest rate environment where everybody had budgets to where we are now with high interest rates when we don't have budgets and budgets are very restricted. So I think that everybody's feeling the tightening of budget, especially in finance departments, where I actually think that we need more budget to create automation. Um, One thing that I wanted to kind of add on top of Nicolas' question is that in order to figure out where you can use AI, you should kind of ask yourself, am I a direct spend company or am I an indirect spend company? So for example, for a direct spend company, spending time on procurement will be really, really critical, where in an indirect spend, maybe less so. For nonprofits, I think the tides are in your favor. What I mean by that is we recently saw that DeepSeek launched as a competitor to OpenAI, and they launched it as a much cheaper path to getting started. But at the same time, Nicolas showed what you can do just with ChatGPT. And I don't know if Nicolas was using the pro version. At $200 a month, you can do a lot. The good thing is that I believe for nonprofits that you wouldn't necessarily need to purchase AI. It should be coming to your existing products. So I think a bigger conversation I would have as a nonprofit is, do I trust that the ERP that I'm using and the existing tools that I'm using are moving forward uh, in a way that will use AI in the next 5 to 10 years that will benefit me without increasing my cost? I don't think that banks will be the market leaders in using generative AI, agentic AI, and so forth. Maybe that's yet to be seen. Banks have a very large security responsibility to hold our money. However, I think that us as software companies do have a responsibility to continuously improve the product that you purchased. So I would highly encourage you just to start having the conversations with your existing tools. And I wouldn't jump too quickly between tools, but this is the right time. Just assume that from 2025 to 2030, ideally your cost to use AI will drop significantly, and the quality of the AI you're using will increase significantly as well.
Amazing, thank you. With that, I think we need to wrap up on our side. I know there were a lot of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. We have those recorded as part of the Zoom webinar backend, so we will be able to reach out with the answers if we did not get to your question. But love all the conversation. Thank you everyone for attending.